So, at last, the worst era of Doctor Who has come to an end. Jodie Whittaker has finally been retired as the Doctor in her recent TV special, The Power of the Doctor, which also featured some familiar faces. There were cameos from the first Doctor, played by David Bradley, the fifth Doctor, played by Peter Davison, the sixth Doctor, played by Colin Baker, the seventh Doctor, played by Sylvester McCoy, and of course, the eighth Doctor, played by Paul McGann. Now, like many pop culture icons that have gone woke in recent years, Doctor Who has basically alienated a lot of longtime fans, and although it has been heading downhill in terms of quality during even the Capaldi era, to many people though, the show basically ended when they changed the character to a woman. Some fans defended this, of course, with a technical argument that Time Lords can change not only their gender but also their race via regeneration, and that's absolutely accurate. But one has to concede that it's quite remarkable that we only got a female Doctor Who around the same time that a trend emerged in pop culture entertainment where there was a big push to have much more female and minority representation in prominent roles. I don't know about you, but I think the gender change was made for political reasons more so than creative ones. Of course, the big news is that when Whittaker's 13th Doctor finally did regenerate, she didn't transform into Ncuti Gatwa, as was expected. Instead, she became David Tennant, who returns to the role for several episodes next year in the run-up to the introduction of the 15th Doctor, played, eventually, by Gatwa. Now, David Tennant's return will probably be a big ratings grabber in the short term, but long term, the diversity agenda pursued by BBC Television is set to continue. On August 2nd, 2022, IndieWire had this article. Neil Patrick Harris says Ncuti Gatwa will be first gay doctor in sexier new Doctor Who. Sex education star Gatwa continues to make history for the long-running BBC sci-fi franchise. After being announced as the first black Time Lord for the beloved BBC sci-fi series, Gatwa's Doctor is confirmed to be queer according to his co-star Neil Patrick Harris. Harris revealed on Variety's Just for Variety podcast that Gatwa will be the first gay Doctor, which is going to be super cool, and that the sex education alum's take makes for a sexier Doctor in the series. Gatwa also played a gay role as teen Eric on the Netflix coming-of-age series. In addition, there's also a new companion who's been cast. The Guardian had this article on May 24th. I'm in awe. Trans actor Yasmin Finney on joining Doctor Who. And this article is from Collider, dated July 13th. Doctor Who's Yasmin Finney confirms her character Rose is trans. We all exist, and we're not going anywhere, period. So just to confirm, that's a trans actor playing a trans character as the new companion. I suppose that modern identity politics will be continuing, even with the return of Russell T Davies as showrunner. Anyway, as I've mentioned before, during the Chris Chibnall, Jodie Whittaker era, Doctor Who has been wrecked by very poor creative and writing decisions, including the complete and unnecessary retconning of the Doctor's history, and thus the undermining of his origin. So in The Timeless Children, the first female Doctor, played by Jodie Whittaker, is taken prisoner by the Master and is shown the true history of Gallifrey and where the Time Lords came from. The mystery of the Doctor is finally revealed, something that fans never asked for, as the mysterious and enigmatic nature of the Doctor was part of what made the character so interesting. The Doctor's true past was never explained for the past 50 years, and by keeping so many secrets, it's only added to the allure of the character through all of his various incarnations. All we knew was that he was a Time Lord who stole a TARDIS and is now travelling across space and time with his companions. Not everything has to be explained. Many things are best left up to the audience's imagination. As soon as everything is explained, the mystery and intrigue is gone, and the Doctor loses the very thing that made him, or in this case her, truly unique and interesting. The Doctor had a past. It could be a dark past. What's the Doctor running from? We didn't fully understand the Doctor's true origin, and I think this was a question best left unanswered, because introducing an answer to this question eliminates the intrigue, and what's more, if an answer was given, it would have to be a very good one. So it's best to simply not go there and leave the mystery in place, thus adding to the presence and mythos of the character. But now, much of the mystery has been explained, of course, and there has to be an obvious PC agenda inserted into the origin story. So the Master explains to the Doctor that in a time before everything we know, a female explorer named Tecteun, from a little regarded and sparsely populated planet called Gallifrey. Well, Tecteun was the first of Gallifrey's indigenous people, the Shibogans, to develop space travel. She found something in a remote planet of the galaxy, a gateway to some other universe. Beneath the gateway, she found an abandoned female child of colour. The child apparently came from the other dimension. She decided to adopt this refugee child as her own. Tecteun brought the child back to Gallifrey and began to run tests on this little girl to try to find out more about her. One day, the girl fell off a cliff while playing with a friend. The child died, only to regenerate in front of Tecteun. This was the first regeneration of anyone on the planet of Gallifrey. Tecteun studied the child extensively, and the child underwent several regenerations, and she began to learn more and more about the process of regeneration, and she finally cracked it. So she tested it on herself. She genetically modified herself so that she could also regenerate. She regenerated into this black man. With Tecteun's help, the Time Lords genetically adopted the ability to regenerate. They restricted it to 12 times. So from one young girl, the Time Lords we know were born. And of course, wouldn't you know it, the timeless child is the Doctor. Yes, it turns out, in the interests of diversity, the Doctor began life as a female of colour. Not as William Hartnell's first Doctor. So it turns out that regeneration abilities came from a female child of colour, and the Time Lord's ability to regenerate was made possible by the scientific breakthrough of another female character. You see, the future and the past has to be female because diversity and wokeness. I guess it's similar to how on Star Trek Discovery, Michael Burnham made Spock the great character that we knew. Gotta love that historical revisionism. So now we know that the Doctor had many other lifetimes before the ones that we knew of, which means that all the numbering of all of the Doctors 1 through 13 now means basically nothing. Now, the Doctor doesn't remember any of this past because her memory was wiped, and therefore there's no telling how many times that the Doctor has already regenerated. Of course, it could be argued that the Doctor has had past lifetimes where he didn't refer to himself as the Doctor, like when he was the War Doctor, for example, but we now know that this woman of colour was also called the Doctor, so who knows how many past Doctors there actually were. So, Tecteun basically created the Time Lords from the DNA of the Doctor, back when the Doctor was a small female of colour. Oh man, if that's the explanation of the Doctor's origin, it sure as hell wasn't worth it. This retcon is just pure vandalization of a franchise, and indeed, a beloved character. Well, so much for, it's time to have a female Doctor for a change. Oh no, they had to go back and make it so that the Doctor, who was always originally a white male, was actually always originally a black female. Because the future is going to be all girl.
Is the future going to be all girl? We can only hope.
And apparently, so too is the past. Over the years, the Doctor's true origin may not have been known to fans, but there was most definitely a strong canonical foundation, which was that the Doctor's first iteration was William Hartnell's version, first seen in 1963. But of course, all cultural icons and institutions from Star Wars to Star Trek, Terminator to Doctor Who and James Bond, they're all being deconstructed these days in order to insert progressive politics and the diversity agenda. So many of the current writers and showrunners of long-running popular franchises seem to undermine and devalue the rich foundations of the series they're writing for. This could be argued to be a symptom of the West in general at the moment. The embrace of nihilism begins with the belief that nothing matters, and that has to include the past. Nothing ever mattered. So who cares if everything is destroyed? The mentality seems to be that the past was oppressive or racist or sexist or whatever. So white men have to be represented less and history can be rewritten. There's no intrinsic value to the way things were. The foundations of the house and the very walls and support structures holding the building together must not truly matter. So they can be torn down and somehow
they still expect that the house will remain standing. Doctor Who writers and producers spent decades world-building and carefully establishing the canon and continuity of the franchise, only for it to be retroactively modified in the interests of modern liberal identity politics, and what's more, it's being done by people who lack the imagination, ingenuity, and creative ability of their predecessors. And yet, these current custodians of the franchise have made the biggest negative impacts upon canon. It's too bad that they couldn't have taken their awful story ideas and uninteresting characters and placed them into a completely new and original TV series, rather than inserting them into Doctor Who. So now we know where all the previous Doctors originated from this one young girl who was basically experimented on, and in an origin story that was also uninteresting, unnecessary, uninspiring, lazy, and downright destructive to the show's established canon. It undermines the legacy of all the previous incarnations of the Doctor. Doctor Who's 11th and 12th seasons are an example of how to completely alienate a long-time core audience that was built over decades, which I predicted was going to happen when the decision was made to make the Doctor female. A move that was obviously done in the interests of serving political correctness.
In conclusion, I believe it doesn't matter if they bring back one of the most popular Doctors in the form of David Tennant. In my opinion, the damage to Doctor Who's lore and its legacy has already been done.